Welcome back to Seven Moons Astrology. My name is Sarah Kirby, and today I have a very special guest with me. This is Amie Li of Illumistrology. She is an expert in all things relationship charts and how the astrology can predict how a relationship will unfold and what it is meant to teach us. We are collaborating because we're great friends. She's a Sag Ascendant, and I'm a Sag Sun. And so we're teaming up for this episode on the coming eclipse season this October with the new moon solar eclipse in Libra and the full moon lunar eclipse in Taurus. We're going to talk about what has happened in 2023.
It's been a lot.
It's been a great deal of change. And so much of the energy of this cycle has to do with changes in relationships. So who better to help us through that than Amie? So first, I think what we wanted to start by doing is talking a little bit about the macro scale of 2023 and take us back to spring. What happened in the spring?
So in the spring, I feel like everyone was, aside from individual charts, a majority of us could probably feel this pressure of wanting to bunker down and stay home and relax and sleep and eat and find ways to comfort ourselves. Mm-hmm. We had a stellium of Taurus that was in the sky. This stellium really put us in a rooting mode, as Taurus does. Mm-hmm. And so at the beginning of the year, we saw people not making any big moves and kind of just feeling almost like this stuck in the mud energy.
Yes. Yeah, this stuck in the mud is a perfect analogy since Taurus is an earth sign. But what it's about is staying the course and persistence and determination. So if we think about the previous nodal cycle that I've been talking so much about on this channel with the North Node in Taurus and the South Node in Scorpio, really what this has been about is teaching us patience and persistence when it comes to stabilizing our material world, identifying what it is we truly value. And so I kept repeating, slow down, especially because with the South Node in Scorpio, what we really want to do is move away from intensity, toxicity, ups and downs, turbulent situations. And so consequence of that Taurus energy is to, at certain points, feel stuck, stagnant. And that's what we saw in the spring. So the chart I have up on the screen right now is from the lunar eclipse that we had in early May. For you, what did this eclipse signify?
For me, it was telling me, so every time I look at what's happening, I do always look at the opposite sign. And as you were talking about the Taurus North Node and the Scorpio South Node, what we're moving away from is reconstruction, because reconstruction represents Scorpio, right? So kind of like what you were saying, we're starting to build a foundation for ourselves, something that can be our place to land so that we know how to step forward in any way. We saw this in the economy. We saw housing market go up. We saw the cost of living going up in a lot of places, and so people almost had no choice but to bunker down, especially on their financial values and their financial possessions. And so when I was seeing Taurus really prominent in the sky, first it was validating because I could not stop sleeping during this time.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, well, most of the sky's in Taurus, and then there's also Saturn in Pisces, and a lot of other things I believe are in Scorpio. And so there's just like a lot of energy around not moving, and it made me feel comforted and that I was kind of almost like saving my energy for what's coming.
Yeah. And so there's a waiting quality to the time in spring because, so much changed. We had Saturn enter Pisces, right? And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Pluto made its first ingress into Aquarius, and Jupiter made its move into Taurus shortly after this eclipse here, which I might have called it the Taurus eclipse. It's actually the Scorpio eclipse. And so at this point in particular, though, when we had Jupiter at the final degrees of Aries, to me, this personally felt like a built-up frustration with the stuckness. Mm-hmm. So I need this new beginning to come. I need something about the situation that I've been in for the past 2 years to change. That came in the summer.
Yeah.
So what happened in the summer?
And you know what's funny is I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, I feel so lazy. I can't wait for Gemini season to start. Mm-hmm. Because I was just needing some kind of change to kind of get me out of that rift. And so in the summer as well, not only did, the sun finally move out of Taurus, But we saw the nodes shift, and we saw the nodes shift out of Taurus and Scorpio into the North Node going into Aries and the South Node going into Libra. And this was a catalyst to a lot of relationship beginnings and a lot of relationship endings and a lot of confrontation in relationships. Overall, the main theme, obviously, relationships, because Libra represents our codependency. Libra represents one-to-one partnerships. And then we were seeing Aries, this, okay, I'm ready to fight energy, come out on the opposite end of what our partnerships are bringing us.
So yeah, I've been getting a lot of questions from my clients about what this shift in the nodal axis really signifies. So if we were working with Taurus Scorpio before and it was about stabilizing, slowing down, grounding, finding ways to increase comfort in our lives, determining what is fertile in our lives and what is sterile, the shift into Aries, as you said, is about essentially coming back to yourself and releasing over-reliance on relationships.
Yeah, and I'm going to add in my personal note from my natal chart. I have my North Node is in the first house, which is Aries house, and my South Node is in the seventh house, which is Libra's house. And so I'm watching everyone kind of go through these motions, and I'm like, oh, this feels very familiar to me,
It's familiar.
Yeah, and I think, with all the nodes, the goal is always to find the balance in between. And so while the North Node is in Aries and the South Node is in Libra, it's about moving forward, but making sure that you know that you can't do everything alone, and making sure that, okay, I have this person that I can rely on, or this person is here to amplify me, and how do I find the balance and the harmony between that?
Right. And so in late July, early August, when the nodes finally shifted into Aries and Libra, that's when we get the impetus to take the risks necessary to figure out how to start to balance the Aries-Libra axis, right? So lots of changes. And then almost immediately after that, or maybe it was a week before, Venus, retrograde in Leo. What's your perspective on this?
I feel like Venus in retrograde was just so precisely came at the time that it needed to come, because we're seeing people starting to stand up for what they believe in. We're seeing people starting to recognize their boundaries, and breaking through old relationship patterns. And then here comes Venus in retrograde to really put us under the heat.
Yes.
And Venus being in Leo, such a strong sign for Venus to be in, and a fixed sign for Venus to be in, to be like, hold on to that thought and continue sitting in that heat and continue to look at the patterns that you have in relationships that haven't served you. And then, I don't know if you found this with your clients, but a lot of my clients, their exes had come back into their lives. And it's like, remember that pattern that you had that you wouldn't let go of? Well, let me remind you what it looks like now, right? And so I think that was something essential for people to continue to move forward on their path of wherever Aries falls into their chart.
And it is so precise and relevant because Leo and Aries, well, they're both fire signs, but they're both signs that are very self-focused, right? So Aries is about what I want, what my goals are, and I want it now. And Leo is about my creativity, my sense of self, my happiness, my joy, my pride, and my accomplishments, and being recognized and being seen. So really for me, the Venus retrograde was an opportunity to reevaluate how we're sourcing our sense of self-worth and where our ego and pride have gotten out of check. And we see that through the way that we're spending money and the kinds of relationship dynamics that we've been in, the Venusian topics. So the past 2.5-ish years with the Taurus cycle, we're looking at money and material value. Money and material value, and also personal principles. And now we're looking at relationships versus self, and fairness, and peace, and harmony in our relationships. And while still getting what we want.
Right, exactly. And I think that whole explanation is the dance that we're doing, right? Where it's like, okay, I want to have harmony and a peaceful relationship, one that doesn't have turbulence, one that has a equal partnership, but how am I going to get it? How are you going to fight for that harmonic relationship that you're looking for, right? And sometimes that looks like leaving a relationship that hasn't served you. Sometimes that looks like trying to get into a relationship that maybe you thought was out of your league and actually, you know, going for it and making a shot at it. Or it looks like finally going to therapy or finally gaining this skill that you've always wanted to gain, you know, in order to better become yourself. Because the whole part of relationships too, that I tell clients all the time when it comes to Synastry and Composite, is if you are true to yourself, universal law, you attract what's meant for you. You attract what's supposed to come. And so we're seeing the Venus and Leo retrograde, and we're seeing this Aries North Node really solidify who a person is on their own, so that they can attract their balanced partner.
And 2023 has this quality of push and pull to it the entire year. So back in the spring, we had the new moon eclipse in Aries. It was the first eclipse in Aries, and for me it was kind of like, I don't know, it was kind of cheating a little bit because the nodes weren't in Aries yet, but it was an intro to what this energy is going to be. Yeah, it was the trailer. That's the perfect word. And then we had the lunar eclipse in Scorpio. We've got the Venus retrograde over the summer and the node shift, and now this fall we're going to have the first, what I'm calling official eclipse in this axis, with the new moon eclipse in Libra, and the closing of the past cycle with the full moon eclipse in Taurus. So earlier when we were chatting about this, you had the best analogy I've ever heard for what this feels like. So tell me that.
Yeah, so I see this eclipse as a frog jumping on a lily pad, where the Libra energy that is happening versus a Scorpio energy that had happened before. Scorpio energy is about reconstruction and about, you know, obsessions and holding on to something, having control, right? And Scorpio is a very primitive sign. It wants to feel things out before it makes any moves. And so when the South Node shifted into Libra, and with the Libra eclipse that's happening, we're seeing people using their social skills and starting on one lily pad and finding one person that they can talk to and figure out and reflect with, and then getting ready to jump to the next lily pad. Because Libra can be passive aggressive and Libra can take a long time to make decisions, but when Libra has a partner to do it with, then they're able to gather information faster, and then they can jump into the next lily pad.
Right. It's the opportunist energy that makes its decisions through the mirror of the people around. The reason why the sun is considered to be at fall in Libra is because your entire sense of identity, sun, is rooted in other people. That's why we say the sun is at fall in Libra. And so there's working through patterns of indecision is also a big part of what this cycle will entail. When you shared that analogy with me the first time, I thought about how this applies to my own life as a Libra moon. And there's a certain stretching quality about 2023 where we have a foot in the past and a foot in the future. And we've definitely taken initial steps towards that fresh start energy when the nodes shifted this summer. But we're still teetering. We're still on the seesaw, still thinking about the past. Saturn's in Pisces. We're still evaluating the past. We're still processing the feelings, the karma, things that we've lost, things that we've let go of.
We had multiple planets in retrograde to start
all
there.
of the retrograde
and
energy.
I feel like a lot of this is almost like cleaning out the closet before we continue to move forward. Because if you look at the angular houses too, and you look at the personal planets in astrology, relationships do impact us significantly. And so I feel like with this nodal shift that's happened, a lot of this is preparing us to make sure that we are having a stronger relationship with ourselves, and that way we can attract strong partners that come into our life before the nodes continue to shift and before the rest of the legacy begins. That's what I'm seeing.
I think that's spot on. And the mantras that I've been giving to my clients and to my friends, and the way that I'm summarizing what this period of time really entails, there's a few. Date yourself. So even if you're in a relationship that you love, make sure you're dating yourself to avoid the issues of codependency. Be your own best friend, right? You can't be overly reliant on other people to have your back, or outsource your peace to people that maybe you thought you could rely on at one point, because there's a lot of that coming up. And then fight for your peace. Fight for your peace. Protect your peace.
Yeah, and I think you're responsible for your own joy as well.
Yeah.
You know, instead of relying on your partner to be responsible for your joy, you're responsible for your own joy. And so you have to figure out what that looks like for you too. Again, as someone who lives with a North Node in my natal first house and South Node in my natal seventh house, the big theme for me as well that I see so much in this transit and people learning to do, and something that I still learn to do because it's a node, so it's going to take my whole life to learn, right, is to make sure you're always setting enough time for yourself. Because when you move further away from yourself, you are now imbalancing the nodes, and then they're not happy, and then you're going to see these karmic things start to come your way. It's kind of like the movie Inception, when you're staring at people in Inception, if you've ever seen the movie, and then suddenly they know that you're in Inception, right? And then everyone starts to come your way. I feel like that's a lot of the nodes. When you imbalance them, it's almost like the universe is like, nope, you're off track. Like, we have to do this now. My eyes are directly on you. You have a spotlight on you because you're off track.
Right.
And so I do want to reiterate that making sure that you are spending enough time knowing who you are, doing the things you love, even if you're in a relationship and maybe you stop singing, you stop painting, you stop doing all the things you want to do, go back and dip into that because you don't want to imbalance the nodes.
Right. And stop outsourcing your decision-making process to other people, period. You know, whether it's a romantic partner or not. Stop outsourcing your decision-making and figure out what your decision-making process is. Let's talk about this October.
Okay.
Because this October will be quite dynamic. We have the new moon, solar eclipse in Libra on the 14th. It's very close to the south node here. And it's also very close to Mercury, which is opposing Chiron. And so the eclipse itself is also opposing Chiron. It's square, which we love, T-square Pluto at the final degrees of Capricorn. So cardinal signs are very affected by this energy. That would be Cancer and Capricorn, Libra and Aries. These signs, especially if you have placements here at the final 10 degrees, the final decan, this is an eclipse directly affecting your life. And so it's square Pluto here, which of course to me represents some kind of permanent change or transformation. And we've also got this eclipse in a configuration known as the Yod, the finger of God, making 150-degree angles here with Neptune in Pisces and Uranus still in Taurus. How would you summarize this eclipse?
When I first looked at it, I said, ew.
Yes, ew.
It's like, ew. And I want to reiterate, that's not like a negative thing. It's just like, oof, this is a lot.
It's like a life-changing thing.
Yes, there's going to be permanent decisions made, as you were saying, and that can mean like marrying, divorce, having a child, you know,
lawyering
up, making, finalizing contracts.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Long-term impacts, long-term commitments.
Letting go of friendships.
Yes.
Starting business
partnerships. Yeah.
Right? So it is a new moon eclipse, and it's really the first one in this cycle. So what we begin here is going to play out over the next 6 and 12 months. There is something very challenging about it, whether it's something happy, like a marriage, or not. There's something that feels like we're resisting it in some way.
Definitely. I feel like a yod has a similar effect to this like rubber band and slingshot, where like it's pulling back, and you don't know when it's going to snap, especially since Uranus is in the game as well.
Yeah. Yes.
And then at some point it snaps, but we feel that resistance the whole time we're being pulled back. And when I'm seeing like, okay, so I see Chiron is opposing the moon and opposing Mercury, and to me this is telling me there are deep wounds that are going to be revealed, whether you're happy in a relationship, or maybe you're dating, or maybe you're trying to figure out what's happening in your current relationship. Wounds are coming to the surface, and you're going to be thinking about them constantly until that rubber band snaps. And a lot of the wounds are going to be coming from your attachment styles, right? Because we're talking about the moon itself here with Chiron. So, you know, what has happened in your younger self or in your inner child or when you were a kid that wasn't fulfilled, that's going to get resurfaced. What kind of attachment style did you develop? That's going to get resurfaced. The why behind it is going to get resurfaced.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so perfect. And so to ground that into literal things that could be happening right now, the wounds that get surfaced, to me, that's about something that we felt has been very unfair or unjust, right? Because that's what Libra is all about: fairness, diplomacy, making sure everyone has what they need, everything's balanced, everybody's taken care of. And so this can be something unjust, unfair, that we are now having to decide to defend or assert, and how to go about that. And this is exposed through our relationships, as you said, but it can also come up in dynamics where, you know, maybe it's a friend or it's someone you're relating to through business, where somebody did you wrong, somebody did you dirty, and now you have to figure out how to proceed. And because Mercury's opposing Chiron, that typically will suggest that there are some uncomfortable conversations that need to happen, and the nature of those conversations can be really passive aggressive. Yeah, because Mercury in Libra it needs to say what it wants to say, but is going to say it in a way that doesn't sound too offensive, and so then you don't really know what you're talking about.
Right. But Chiron's confrontational.
Right, especially in Aries, and the call of the time is the North Node in Aries, which is to be more direct. Keep it simple. Say what you need to say. There's something we have to let go of here as well, because it's with the South Node. The eclipse is with the South Node. So, what might it be that you have to let go of?
I think you hit the nail on the head. We're letting go of passive aggressive energy, especially because passive aggressiveness can a lot of times lead us to holding resentment towards others, because we want something but we're not being direct about it, and so now we're holding resentment and thinking that things are unjust when we're actually not doing our part in communicating.
That is such an astute point, because Libra is definitely the most bitter, resentful sign for exactly that reason. So if you are not getting rid of a relationship, let's say you're not eliminating a relationship, a friendship, whatever it is, or you're trying to take an existing relationship and shift it into its next chapter, part of what you need to let go of is those feelings of resentment that have built up, and say what you need, have a direct conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like as we're talking about the yod having the Taurus energy over there in Uranus, and then we have the Pisces and Saturn, and then pointing at this Libra stellium, which is a lot of things, but overall what that means is we have to remember what our values are, so we can use those values as a tool on how to be direct. So, you know, I really need you to do this for me. It's important to me because of this, right? Because of how I was as a child, or what wasn't given to me as a child. Again, confronting the wound, the childhood wound that has happened. And by doing this, we're working with our own spiritual attunement. We're working with our own karmic debt, because that is represented in Saturn and Pisces. And so we're getting spiritually aligned by shooting that rubber band forward into confrontation of things that we've been trying to hold to the side and trying to avoid conflict that has not benefited us.
Absolutely. Libra to me is the art of the deal. Deals that we make with everybody that we engage with in any shape or form. And we bring a lot of unconscious need to the table, marked by what we did or didn't get in childhood, or the wounds that we have. That's Chiron's involvement. And so Neptune in Pisces is about what's deep in the sea of our subconscious that we are not fully aware of ourselves, and we bring that to these relationships, and when they don't meet our expectations, that's when we start corrupting the energy. And Libra can be quite idealistic. And Libra will have a tendency of denying its own needs, because it's easygoing until it's not.
It wants to keep the peace.
It's easygoing until it's not. And so be careful around this time of bringing those unconscious expectations into relationships and built up resentment from things you've never said. We have the opportunity here with Uranus and Taurus as a part of this configuration to recall the values that we've just solidified and established through the past nodal cycle with the North Node in Taurus.
Exactly.
This Neptune-Uranus yod here also reminds me of the lily pad analogy, because we're not quite comfortable in the new paradigm yet. We're not.
We're just starting.
So because we're just beginning and we're going to process and work this out for the next almost 2 years, there's a reluctance to do the letting go, do the forgiving, which to me is something I will keep repeating ad nauseum as long as Saturn is in Pisces.
Both of our angular houses.
In our angular houses, and it's really making it clear to me. But you know, it's at the first degree of Pisces here is the most pure principle of Pisces to have Saturn involved. You know, especially because it's making the trine to Mars and Scorpio. what does Scorpio do? It resists, it wants control, it wants to hold on.
Mm-hmm.
And Saturn and Pisces says, no, like you need to let go. Everything is the same. We're all the same. It's dust in the wind.
Mm-hmm.
Forgive, unconditional love.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's part of the resolution here is if you're going to be able to process these patterns that you've had since the initial wounding with Chiron, which could be years, could be your whole life, then that's a key component of doing it, because that's what's stopping you from making clear decisions.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would tell people too, like, prepare to be triggered a lot.
Yeah.
Over the next, 18 months. I'm in a new relationship, and the relationship is great because, we talk about how these things can impact in all different sorts of ways, and there's going to be people out there who are ending relationships and ending cycles, and you're going to very much be feeling those things, and then people like me who are going to be starting relationships. And even in my relationship, I've been triggered a lot, but they've been really good because they've been, as Chiron is doing, lifting up old wounds that I was too passive to really address before. And now I'm like, okay, I do actually want to, work through this. And so I would like to just reiterate that you're going to be triggered a lot, but the key is shifting and reframing the mindset instead of, oh, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening again? Because sometimes we think that, oh, I fell into this pattern again and I really tried not to get into this pattern again. It could be, right, the possible reframe here is that you're actually going to see an old wound surface up that looks like a pattern, and now you get the choice of how you want to confront it.
Yes. Even in happy situations, Libra is still the mirror. Even when people decide to take their relationship into a marriage, there's still a huge transformation of identity. And so that's a lot of what goes on with the North Node in Aries too. It's how am I thinking about who I am now in this fresh start, in this new paradigm? Who am I as a business person? Who am I as a partner? Who am I as a friend? And those questions are really important over the next year and a half.
Exactly. And giving you the energy to do it.
Yes. So literal things that I've seen a lot of my clients and family members and friends do is, lawyering up because somebody that they were in business with did them dirty, or going through a divorce, right? Because working with the legal establishment is a classic expression of Libra energy, so that can come up right now. People growing and changing to the point that they are no longer resonating with friendships that they've had for a very long time. Leveling up relationships, breaking off relationships. And having tough conversations to take relationships into their next state. So that's what I see with this. So final thoughts on the new moon Libra eclipse.
Yeah, overall, I would say this is like a purge, kind of like when you're in a skincare routine and you are purging your skin, but getting ready for that glow that's coming underneath.
Yeah, and since Libra is also in part about beauty, sometimes you gotta go through the retin-A slough first before things look smooth and glowing.
Yes.
So then that brings us to the lunar partial eclipse in Taurus on October 28th, which is the final closing eclipse of the Taurus-Scorpio cycle. So it's conjunct Jupiter, and it's opposing Mars, Mercury, and of course the Sun in Scorpio.
Yeah, I think that this has a lot to do with being so strong in your values that you can now tell when you're being manipulated and when someone is trying to take advantage of you.
Mars loves to be in Scorpio as the traditional ruler of Scorpio, but there's something about this energy, especially in light of all of the relationship power plays and dynamics going on this month, that this can almost, to me, suggest like a vindictive energy. Conjunct Mercury, maybe there's a vindictive communication going on, but this is also a highly discerning and self-protective energy. And with the moon loving to be in Taurus in its exalted sign, and Jupiter the great benefic, to me this gives us the higher wisdom to spot these patterns and then to stay grounded in everything that we've learned over the past 2 years. And so for people who the past 2 years were, if it was about financial stability, then this is the ability to discern about your investments, to see your investments materialize, to spend your money in a way that is more wise and more considerate of the long term. If this is about relationships, then this is the ability to hold strong with your principles and protect what it is that you value. If this cycle was about moving at a slower pace of life and having better work-life balance and relaxing and enjoying the pleasures and comforts of life more, then when things get intense, as they have a habit of doing during Scorpio season, you can remember that it's valuable to take time to relax. So this to me is what this eclipse is about, and it doesn't really need much more explanation than that. The only other aspect that's significant at this time that's worth calling out, in my opinion, is Uranus trine Venus. And to me, that just reiterates exactly what we said, because the trine is a harmonious aspect between these two planets, Venus being the signifier of relationships and money and values. And Uranus, in this case, when it goes positive to me, is about a breakthrough or an awakening. And so I think that at the end of the month, we're able to actually look back on what the past 2 years have taught us and solidify it.
Absolutely.
So now we'll transition into Amie's total expertise. She is so well educated, so well studied on the topic of relationships. And what better time to do that than when we're in all of this season of relationship change?
Well, first I want to say thank you so much for introducing me and highlighting my expertise. This is something new for me to get into. It's a secret that I've held for quite some time. I've been kind of like studying in secret.
And so because of all the relationship change that's going on for the next couple years, I imagine people are going to be exploring more their compatibility and trying to understand that in the chart. So you mentioned a couple different kinds of charts. We've talked Synastry, I've heard Composite, and Davison. What are those? What's the difference?
Yeah, so I love this topic. I could go on forever about this. When I first look at overall how are two people going to interact, I have to look at each individual's chart, right? Because for me and myself, I have a lot of water and fire signs, and I have a lot of Scorpio Sag energy. I need to see what's going to be compatible for me. Where does my Venus fall? Where does my Mars fall? Where's my 7th house fall? What's my 7th house ruler? You know, there's a lot here that goes into it. But once I get a basic understanding of each individual chart, then I overlap it into a synastry chart, which is basically how will these two people interact? What is the overall compatibility of these two people? What's the little dance that they play with each other, right? So that would be synastry. Maybe you guys are really good at expressing yourselves to each other. However, maybe you guys are really bad at saving finances with each other, you know, or enable each other to spend a lot. Okay. That can be found in synastry because that's the dance that you're doing. Yeah. Composite charts, and there's a lot of different interpretations and a lot of studies on this, but from my experience and what I've seen is a composite chart is when two people spend so long with each other, because it's not an actual birth or place in time, it is a calculation between two people. It is when two people spend so much time with each other that they're creating this energy baby. So like as you and I sit next to each other, I'm giving you energy, you're giving me energy, we're creating energy together. The longer we do it and the longer we're in each other's lives, and especially if we were to be with each other every day, that energy grows and grows and grows until it almost encompasses us and we become that. That's why people see sometimes individuals when they get married, they're like, oh, they have changed so much now because of the marriage. Or you see people who were strong individuals and after they got married, they kind of became this unit as a couple. Single entity. Right, the single entity, and that is explained through the composite. So I tell people overall compatibility is going to be synastry. However, where the relationship is going and the purpose of the relationship and what you're going to get out of it is going to be the composite. The composite can tell me where the relationship will go. And then the Davison are the main themes that you need to hit in that relationship. And so if you have a composite and let's say it's full of travel, you have a stellium in the 9th house and maybe it's in Gemini, you're learning a lot of things about each other, you know, gathering information, traveling, whatever it is. But then maybe your Davison is showing a lot of 5th house themes. Well, then you guys have to have a lot of fun, you know, in order to learn. You guys can't just go to the library and study books. You guys are going to have to do a lot of creative fun in order to gain that knowledge you're seeking. But the Davison will show me, you know, the themes that the couples will hit as they're going through their composite. So, yeah.
Like the essential elements of bringing the composite to life. Is that another way of saying it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say so.
Okay. So we start with the synastry,
Okay.
especially if you're meeting someone new, right? What would be a common indicator that the relationship has a lot of potential to be successful and mutually beneficial? And we'll put it in the context of a romantic relationship.
Okay. Whew. Like my head just went into like a whole dialogue. So there are so many beneficial aspects in synastry.
Impossible to claim them all in one video. Can't do
Right.
that.
Impossible to claim them all in one video. I have personal favorites, and that's also based off of my chart and experiences.
Okay.
Right. I would say.
What would people listening want to look for to say this is something I should maybe give a chance or explore more?
I would say first, start with what your values are.
Okay.
If you feel like, my past relationships have not had good communication, you need to look at Mercury in the synastry and if you guys are going to have communication. Maybe you're a great communicator and you can really hold down the communication for both people, but maybe romance hasn't been so strong. Look at where Venus and Mars fall in the synastry and if they're touching each other. I would say for romantic relationships in general, whenever Venus and Mars are aspecting, that's a good thing.
Yes.
Even if it's a square.
Yes.
If they are in tango, they're in tango, and
That's
we
the
want that.
feminine and masculine principle.
Yes. Same with the sun and moon, but that's for all relationships, right? That's for friendships as well. When you have the sun having an aspect with the moon, especially a conjunction or opposition, then we see this natural affinity, natural balance of yin and yang, feminine, masculine energy, especially when it's in opposition. And even when it's in conjunction, the feminine part of that sign can really meet the masculine part of that sign and still make a whole. Right, so sun and moon conjunct or opposition is one that I definitely always recommend. And then when Venus and Mars are aspecting, that's also a great one too.
This makes me think about Saturn, because Saturn gets a bad rap when we look at natal astrology and transits because it's the malefic influence that can bring challenge, but it's also the planet that gives stability and longevity.
Yep.
And so I feel like people sometimes misinterpret Saturn contacts in synastry.
Yep.
So what would you have to say about a healthy placement for Saturn in relationship charts?
Yeah, I would say when we have Saturn on an angular house, and people get really contradictive about the 7th house, or, I don't know, Saturn on the 7th, but some people need it. If you are a very indecisive person, someone Saturn coming into your 7th is like, you're not going anywhere, We're going to make this work. You're going to end up learning how to work through your indecision with me. So then that placement's really helpful. But when I see Saturn on an angular house, Saturn on the 4th, that couple is going to feel like this person is providing me a safe haven to go to. They are reliable, they are consistent, they are disciplined in emotions in ways that I am not, right? When we see Saturn on the 10th, this person believes in me. They believe in my purpose. They want to dignify me, and they want me to develop my skill sets better so that I can serve my world or get better at my career. But there's definitely like a sense of purpose when I see synastry of someone's Saturn falling into someone else's 10th house.
Yeah, well, and and I see a lot of Saturn conjunctions, right? Because they date within the same generation.
Right.
Saturn will be in a sign for 3 years, so it's common to have Saturn in close contact with the person. Would you say that gives stability, or how would you interpret that?
If Saturn is conjunct Saturn, we will see a mutual understanding on how we want to build each other up. We will have a mutual understanding of what discipline looks like. So depending on where Saturn falls, maybe we have an agreement on discipline in finances, or discipline within the relationship, or discipline in how much fun we can have versus how much work we need to do. But there's some sort of agreement in how this relationship is going to mature and what lessons we will learn together.
Okay, fair. So then with a composite chart, let's say we're in a relationship, the synastry is good, it feels great. Now we're evolving into this energy baby that we're making together. What placements do you really like to see in a composite chart that would indicate success?
I would say whenever I see a composite sun conjuncting the composite Venus, or actually moon, Venus, or Jupiter, right? The benefics and, of course, the emotional moon, mother moon. Whenever I see the sun conjuncting or trining any of those, that's a really great start to the composite. I will also say with the composite, It's less about aspects. Those aspects are important. It is more about house placements.
I see.
And so in a composite, people who have stelliums in their composite in the 5th house or the 11th house, I know are already going to do really well. This relationship is focused on self-expression. This relationship is focused on individual joy, promoting each other, being each other's cheerleader, if it's in the 5th house. If it's in the 11th house, this relationship is focused on friendship and hopes and wishes and
our
being
goals,
and
yeah.
our goals and lifting each other up and making sure that we are taken care of holistically, right? When I see a composite stellium in the 7th, this is where it can go one or two ways. You guys are either going to be soulmates, or you could also be twin flames, and then that can go very different directions.
Yeah. Yeah, because a twin flame dynamic will feel challenging at some point. Maybe explosively attractive in the beginning, but can be the source of your own undoing. The 7th house classically being the house of open enemies.
Yep.
Yeah. And so a stellium, in case we didn't call it out, a stellium is when all of the planets sort of traffic jam in one house together. So you're looking for a dominant energy in houses and what that would indicate. What about the ascendant sign? How does that play into effect?
I've noticed the most success with composites when they have a fixed ascendant.
Why would that be?
I believe that the personality itself and how the couple is presenting themselves is consistent.
I see.
And so then they don't have external forces coming in to call out their inconsistency. Right.
So the fixed signs then would be Taurus,
Scorpio,
Leo, and Aquarius. So any of those signs rising on the 1st house would describe a consistent, reliable pattern of behavior.
That the couple will more likely, when they're in a public image or as people are perceiving them, they will make more sense. People will be like, oh yeah, I think that those two make sense to be a couple because they're coming in as one unit that you're looking at.
Right.
Versus like a Gemini ascendant couple, people might start to ask a lot of questions, right? Because you're causing the external people around you to be curious about your relationship. And
there's two sides to this relationship.
Right.
Yes.
And sometimes that's a good thing and sometimes that's a bad thing depending on what the goal is in the relationship.
Yeah. And so a mutable sign like Gemini, these are people who need change. And so there would be multiple iterations of the relationship.
Yep.
And there has to be breathing room for that evolution.
Because in natal charts, we know that the ascendant can really be very strong, almost stronger than
Than the sun, yeah.
Than the sun or other planets, right? The ascendant can really
It's the
dictate.
number one, yeah.
In a composite, a lot of the times it's the midheaven. It's the 10th house.
Midheaven.
Yes.
Because is that what you see as the purpose of the union?
Right. That is actually what the relationship is. The 1st house or the ascendant of the composite is the perception of the relationship.
I see.
How people will perceive it. And then when it's in a natal, in your own ascendant, it's how you perceive yourself. So you feel that that's who you are, right? And so that's why it takes up so much of your personality. But in a composite, it is not that. It is how people are perceiving you as a couple, which can be a vulnerable area or a strong area for you. But what the couple actually is the 10th house, because those are their goals, those are their alignments, that is their purpose together and how they're going to create each other into a strong couple or a weak couple. So when I look at a composite, yes, the ascendant will tell me if external factors might attack this relationship or might accept this relationship right out the gate, but I look at the 10th house to see where that strength is really being buried.
I see. Okay. So all of this I think is really helpful, and I know people as they move through the next year and a half of their lives are going to be asking Libra indecisive questions, constantly looking for other people's opinions, which you should stop doing. But if you are, and you happen to be listening to this, and you're trying to decide, should I be in this relationship or not? Should I let this friend go or not? Is this business partnership right for me? Of course, what they really need to do is book a reading with you because it's far more complicated than we can answer here. But one question I have to ask, placements that when you see them indicate that this is not something you would want to proceed with.
Yeah, so again, it always depends on the individual charts, but there are certain placements that are not for the weak.
Okay.
You know, there are certain placements where I'm like, I would only recommend this to a professional, like a professional counselor or a professional therapist. When I see stelliums in the 12th house, in the 8th house, and in the 7th house, a lot of times this at first I'm like, okay, now let me dive in, right? Or even if it's not a stellium, when I see the sun the moon, Venus, personal planets really, and the North Node, and Chiron, or the vertex. So asteroids play a huge part in the success of a relationship in Synastry, Composite, and Davison. But when I see any of the asteroids themselves or personal planets in the 8th or 12th house, or when I see a stellium, maybe a mix of personal and not personal in the 8th, 7th, or 12th house, I immediately have a little bit of like, oh, okay, gotta dig in. Mm-hmm. There's something here, and then I have to look at the individual chart too to see if they're going to be able to handle it. Again, if they met that person, more than likely they're going to have to go through with it anyways, and there's something for them to learn that is beyond me. But what I can give them is a toolkit so that they're able to process it more on their own as they go through it.
Yeah, because one of the points about getting a relationship reading from an astrology expert is to figure out what strategies you can employ to work with the energy of the relationship effectively and understand the two people individually and how they come together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, same as natal readings, you're getting your natal reading done because you're having a better understanding of like, what are my weaknesses? What are my strengths? What am I here for? What are my goals? Composite is very similar. What is this relationship's strengths? What is this relationship's weakness? What is the relationship's goals, right? Where is this relationship going? Where am I going? It's very similar.
And so for all your Libra eclipse questions, Amie's information and how to contact her will be in the show notes. And then I'm taking readings as well. As always, you can book me with the link in the description. I would say if you have relationship questions, go to this one. So thank you for listening, and I'm hungry, so we're going to go.
All right. Yeah, thank you, and thank you. This is exciting.
It was fun. We'll do more. We'll do more.